Well, good morning, guys. And here we are again at the Mood House and continuing our study this morning with What is a Man? And we're in week 13 of this study. We're looking at the life of Jacob, and we have looked at his life from two aspects. One is what I've divided the text. I know you can't read this, but the text of the Jacob account in two halves of life, the first half and the second half of life. And we're looking at his journey. We're in this section right here, which is basically Genesis 31 through 33. And this is a graphic of what how they divided that chart and how I perceive the male journey in general. And we're plugging aspects of Jacob's life into this model here that I've created over time. But we've looked at his first half. We looked at a few weeks ago where Jacob entered into this second half of life. And can any of you call the occasion in Jacob's life that caused him or allowed him entry into this second half of life? Can you remember what was the occasion? You don't have to cite the scripture, but what was the occasion where Jacob moved into this second half of life? Any of you remember?
Meeting with Esau.
Prior to that.
Wasn't it his fear of Laban?
Yes, yeah, and his admission of fear. That's correct. Guys, this is from my head. This is how I view it, is that when a man finally comes to a place where he understands, at least to some degree, his limitation and can embrace that and admit that, he is ready to move into this second half of life. First half of life is all about ascent. It's all about growing and becoming and developing and conquering, and this is normal and natural for a man's early journey. I think that ascent is moving because of our culture and because of the longevity of life and so forth. I think this is this used to happen quite young, but I think it's now happening later in life all the time. But when a man enters into this area where he is able to embrace his own limitations, and I used that example in Genesis 31:31, where Jacob admits his fear. So Laban says, "Why did you pull this off like this? Why did you just leave in the night, not allow me the privilege to say goodbye?" He says, "Because I was afraid." He admitted that fear. So that was here. And now we're in this section right here. I call it life pushing in, and it's erratic, and we're now pushing right to here. We've looked at two accounts here. Once Jacob admitted his fear and he's moved on free, kind of brought that relationship to closure, he then reaches out to his brother Esau. That's what Dave was mentioning. And that is here early on, chapter 32, 1 through 5 is right here. And in a man's journey, when he comes to this realization of limitations in his life, he starts to think about how his life has affected other people around him. And so he, in using that example here in Jacob, he reached out and he seeks in doing so to make amends with his brother Esau. And that's 32, 1 through 5. But then when he gets the news back that Esau, and along with 400 men, are coming to meet him, it puts Jacob into a very traumatic inward turmoil. So that's what we're looking at. And what we see here, life pushing in, will probably take you and I years and years and years. But in this story of Jacob, we're seeing it in a condensed version of, at the beginning, he's reaching out, trying to make amends, and we're moving through this traumatic up and down time of life to where it's going to culminate with the wrestling of God. And that we're going to be looking at that in the just probably start next week. So, life pushing in, this is review. Jacob is now in a tension between two forces. And here's Jacob in the middle, and there are two forces. And the first force is that Jacob's capacity to embrace his limits. You know, he's already done it. He knows what it tastes like. He's seen it. But you and I, in our journey, it's like every time we come up to an occasion, we are forced with this idea of embracing limitation and releasing control. Okay, so there's one side, and I've already mentioned the other, is his capacity to embrace limits and his ability to relinquish control. Therein is the tension you and I face in this time of life. You know, we realize that we are now not going to be ever invited by the Denver Broncos to play professional football. I mean, I know that's a joke. We realize that we've peaked and we're on the downward side, and in doing so, there are limits. But it is still difficult because of our maleness to relinquish control in any particular occasion. You know, I want it because I want it, and so here is the tension. And that tension, then what it does is it produces a fear within Jacob, a fear to let go. And that's what we've been looking at that. And he's in that fear right now. So I'd like for us to read, here we are, in Genesis 32, 6 through 23. That's the text we're looking at. And within the text, he gets the news that his brother is coming. And it puts him into a tilt. I mean, he is in deep fear here. It's a fear context. Jacob attempts to, in 6 through 8, protect, seek, and fix. So would somebody read the text, 32, 6 through 23, and then we'll move on from there.
And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, "We came to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you, and there are 400 men with him." Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. He divided the people who were with him and the flocks and herds and camels into two camps, thinking, "If Esau comes to the one camp and attacks it, then the camp that is left will escape." And Jacob said, "O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, 'Return to your country and to your kindred, that I may do you good,' I am not worthy of the least of all the deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant, for with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become two camps. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, that he may come and attack me, the mothers with the children, but you said, I will surely do you good, and make your offspring the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude." So he stayed there that night, and from what he had with him, he took a present for his brother Esau, 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milking camels and their calves, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. These he handed over to his servants, every drove by himself, and said to his servants, "Pass on ahead of me and put a space between drove and drove." He instructed the first, "When Esau my brother meets you and asks you, 'To whom do you belong? Where are you going?' and those are these ahead of you, then you shall say, 'They belong to your servant Jacob. They are a present sent to my lord Esau, and moreover he is behind us.'" He likewise instructed the second and the third and all who followed the droves. "You shall say the same thing to Esau when you find him. And you shall say, 'Moreover, your servant Jacob is behind us, for he thought, I may appease him with the present that goes ahead of me, and afterwards I shall see his face. Perhaps he will accept me.' So the present passed on ahead of him, and he himself stayed that night in the camp. The same night he arose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had.
Okay, good. Thank you, Bob. Boy, I just love this scene. Can you picture it? He's in deep fear, and he's going to every resource he has in order to work with it. What are some things that stick out in the text to you guys? What strikes you in this? Yeah, go ahead, Dick.
The lengths that he would go to try and protect himself and maybe minimize his fear and
Uh-huh.
probably a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah, and what are some of those examples that you see? I mean, I see that too. What are some things that strike you?
All the animals that he's providing for Esau, plus splitting into 2 camps.
Yeah.
Just different strategies he's using.
Yeah, the protection right here is primarily the strategy of dividing, minimizing loss. You and I know what that's like, making decisions out of fear to minimize our loss here. And then down here on the other side, he fixes it by, he's trying to fix it by basically bribery, is what he's doing. Yes?
Well, one of the things struck me is he, like you say, he's trying everything he can think of, and he staged all this thing. Instead of it, being everything at one time, there's one section of the gift, and hopefully Esau thinks, hey, this is pretty nice. And then, here comes wow, look what, and then a third, wow.
Yeah.
And so Jacob had this all figured out to try to really, really wow his brother with his generosity.
We call it the old butter up.
Yep.
There's a thought, it makes me think, maybe Mike, you're aware of this in marriage counseling, is that you teach a man in giving gifts, you only get 1 point per gift when you give one to your wife. And so, you don't want to bundle them together, you want them to count. So you give a box of chocolates, and that's 1 point. And some roses, and that's 1 point. But if you give them together at the same time, it's only 1 point. So what you want to do is you want to split it up. Go ahead.
From a military perspective, this bothers me, because the general is supposed to lead the troops into battle, and it just strikes me that he seems to be almost cowering behind his troops, for lack of a better word. He's sending them in there into the fray, not knowing what's going to happen, hoping that he can appease him. But he's thinking this is not going to be good. But he's back at the back. He's not leading them up there.
He what?
He's leading from I mean to me, the picture should be him walking up to his brother and saying, I am so sorry, here's what I've brought for you. These people that I'm out in front of trying to protect, that's what I want to offer you, but not throw them out there, because if he doesn't accept them, then whoa. And that was his plan. It's like, if they get mangled, we can run away. This bunch can run away. And I mean, that bothers me.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's in a perfect world, we'd like to see him out there, but I would say sooner or later, Jeff, we all come to this place.
I mean, I think I found myself there, but it still grates on me.
Yeah, we'd like to see him different here. Any other comments?
So maybe
Yeah.
the biggest thing for me is that it seems like he doesn't understand what matters. His priorities are in the wrong place, like you were saying. But it's because he doesn't understand what matters. And it's not that he doesn't have the information, because you see there that he's saying, God said, God said, God said.
Uh-huh.
But instead of saying what God says matters, that's the key thing. The allocator's a bunch of people coming, but God said, and instead of understanding that that's the key thing he's worried about.
I think that's a great insight, Mike, and I think that we're going to really see things come into focus as the story, as we see the uniting of the two brothers. It's just it brings tears to my eyes every time we see it, because therein is where we see what really is important. But we'll be looking at that in the next, next few weeks. What I thought was, and you guys have hit on it, is that his response is mixed, just like you and I, our response when we're in fear. We're men of faith, but yet we're men, men that have to deal with this condition, this human fallen condition that we're in, and therein is what we see here. We see a man who's trying to limit his losses, but yet there is faith. He's seeking God through that, and he's appealing to God's promise to him. God, didn't you say? And I can understand that. I can identify with that. And then, of course, he's saying, okay, well, I need to help things along a little bit, so let me try to fix it and bribe my brother. I mean, this is so natural. This is so the way we are as men. And so we've looked at the text, and what we talked about last week is this idea of being played out. And I used, or not last week, 2 weeks ago, I used the analogy, you see the slide changing, of a fly fisher. And again, I'm not suggesting that God is the great fly fisher and he fishes for us to watch us wiggle on the end of the line. That's not the case. But being played out is like being on the end of a fly rod. And the fly is out there, and the fish catches it or goes after it, and he's doing everything he can to get out, to wiggle, to expend energy, to try to get out. But he doesn't understand, the trout does not understand that the fly fisherman is not there to kill the fish. It's merely a sport for him. And so the fly fisherman has a high rod, and Alan could really talk a lot about this, how to bring the fish in and play the fish out, because if you try to land the fish too quickly, you could break the line. You have to let the fish play out and get tired and get exhausted. And I use that analogy because at our stage of life, guys, we are being played out in the sense that the whole idea of transformation is to come to an end of my deal, so God's deal can work through me. That's the idea. And as we allow ourselves to be played out, this need to protect, this need to seek, this need to fix becomes less powerful in our lives. And this idea, what I've already introduced, and Mike, I know you're not aware of this term, but this greater pull, because we're in the image of God, we will allow ourselves to let go here in order to embrace this bigger picture, this unknown by faith. And I would call that release. It's basically a relinquishing, a releasing of control as we allow ourselves to be played out. So that's the idea there. And before we go into table time, I was thinking about this text, and this idea of being played out. And I'm going to throw this as something I'm going to throw out at no additional charge to you. And I'm fully aware that you guys are aware of this text. It's quoted 2 times in the book of Proverbs, which is the book of wisdom. And there's a way which seems right to a man, but the end is the way of death. Now, that's quoted 2 times. And I have always looked at that text as, there's this destructive way within us because of our fallenness that if left to my own devices, it leads to death. And death here can mean definitely a separation, maybe even hell, but a destructive death, hellish type of result. And it's what I'm doing because I think is right. Now, this could very well be the meaning of the text, but I thought of this text, guys, again, and this is just me speaking here, within the light of being played out. And a necessary aspect in a man's life that we are being, in a sense, played out, trying to let go of our own, or invited to let go of our own devices, so that the transformation and the power of Jesus Christ can be lived out through us. And so, in that way, it's just for what it's worth, is that there's a way that seems right. The way that is right to me is to, keep fighting, keep resisting, keep trying to conquer. Don't let go. Hold on and control it. But the end of that, for us all, is death. We have to let go. But that's not the end of the story. There is a resurrection that's part of that. So anyway, I'll just kind of throw that out to you. And everything inside of me says protect. Certainly, I'm a man of faith, so it's seek. But yet I got to fix it too. I got to help God. It's kind of a mixed blend here. But that's what I think is the right way. And we see it reflected in, of course, Jacob's life in the story. But where that has to lead is death. And death is the ultimate letting go. Is the ultimate releasing of control. So anyway, what I'd like for us to do now for our time, our table time, is to ponder around the table, ponder this question together and discuss it. And I'll join this group right here. What does being played out look like in and through you? What does this look like, being played out? If it's a natural and necessary part in a man's life, and that's my position, guys. I think that this is a natural and necessary part of transformation in our lives, being played out. Letting go of my devices in order to reflect what God has already done within me. Being played out. What does it look like in and through you, and in what way can you relate to this Jacob story? So let's spend the remainder of our time with that, and then I'll just get up here and we'll close it out and call it a day. So